I found it tucked inside an old coffee can on the back shelf of the laundry room, behind the bottle of fabric softener and a rusted box of dryer sheets. A bank statement, not mine. It belonged to the woman who had been folding other people's laundry in my shop for the past 3 years. The account balance read $3,847,000. My hands weren't just shaking, my whole body went still the way it does when the world tilts and you're not sure which way is up anymore. I could hear her out front, the familiar sound of the industrial dryer tumbling a load of flannel shirts, the soft thump, thump, thump that had become the rhythm of my days. I folded the statement back along its creases and slipped it exactly where I'd found it. Let me start from the beginning, because none of this makes sense without it. 3 years ago, I was 61 years old and I was losing everything. Not dramatically, not all at once, just slowly, the way a sweater unravels, one thread at a time until suddenly you're holding nothing. My husband, Frank, had died 18 months before that. Pancreatic cancer. 6 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. That's how fast it goes. One morning he was complaining about his back, and 6 weeks later I was standing in a cemetery in Denton, Texas, in November wind watching them lower him into the ground. Frank had been the one who kept the books. Literally. He had a little desk in the back of our laundromat, a place called Walsh Clean, which we'd built together over 22 years. Nothing fancy. 12 washers, 8 dryers, a folding table the length of a school bus, and a small drop-off service for people who didn't have time to do their own laundry. It was never going to make us rich, but it was ours. After Frank died, I discovered that ours had quietly become mine, along with $34,000 in deferred equipment maintenance he'd been putting off, a lease renewal coming due in 4 months that the landlord was already threatening to raise by 30%. And a commercial washing machine that had been limping along on prayers and Frank's particular brand of mechanical stubbornness. My son called from Phoenix every Sunday. He wanted me to sell the place, move out there, help with the grandkids. He said it gently, the way he always did everything, but I heard what was underneath it. Mom, you're 61 years old. Mom, you're alone. Mom, you can't do this by yourself. Maybe he was right. Maybe I couldn't, but I wasn't ready to find out. That's the context. That's the life I was living on the Tuesday morning in February when a woman appeared at my door before I'd even flipped the open sign around. She was somewhere in her mid-50s, I guessed. Dark coat, sensible shoes, a canvas tote bag over one shoulder. Not homeless looking, exactly, but something about her had that quality of a person who had recently stopped caring what they looked like to other people. Her hair was cut short and practical, no jewelry, no makeup. She stood at the door and waited. I unlocked it and pushed it open. "Can I help you?" "I heard you might need help," she said. "Around the shop." I'd put a handwritten index card in the window 2 days before. Part-time, flexible hours, cash. I'd gotten 2 calls, both no-shows. "What kind of work are you looking for?" I asked. "Whatever you need," she said. "I'm good with my hands. I work hard. I don't complain." She said it plainly without any particular emotion, like she was reading off a list of features on an appliance. "What's your name?" "June," she said. "June Whitfield." "I'm Bev," I said. "Beverly Walsh, come on in." I don't know what made me do it. Maybe I was desperate. Maybe it was the way she said she didn't complain, because I was so tired of people who did. Maybe it was just that it was cold outside and she was standing there and something in me recognized, something in her, the way you sometimes recognize a person who has been carrying something heavy for a long time. I showed her around. The machines, the folding area, the drop-off counter, the tiny bathroom in the back, the storage room with the shelf unit and the old coffee maker. She took it all in without a word, just nodded, asked 2 precise questions about the folding process and how I tracked drop-off orders. Good questions. Practical questions. I can pay $8 an hour, I told her. Cash. Hours are flexible, but I need someone here 6 days a week, 9 to 5, with some exceptions around school pickup rushes and Saturday mornings. That works, she said. Do you have a place to stay? It was none of my business. I knew that even as I was asking it. She paused. I'm between situations at the moment. There's a storage room, I said. It's nothing special. There's a bathroom with a shower. I used to let my nephew stay back there when he was in between apartments. There's a cot somewhere. I don't want to impose. I'm offering, I said, so it's not an imposition. She looked at me for a long moment. Those steady gray eyes that I would come to know very well. She seemed to be calculating something, or maybe just deciding whether to trust me. All right, she said. Thank you. That was it. That was how it started. My son was not pleased when I told him. He called the following Sunday as usual, and I mentioned it somewhere between the part about the dryer belt and the part about the city sidewalk repair blocking our parking for 2 weeks. I hired someone to help out. She's staying in the storage room for now. There was a silence. Mom, what do you mean staying in the storage room? Just temporarily. She needed a place, I needed help. It's fine. You don't know this woman. I know she shows up on time and doesn't steal. 3 weeks in, that's more than I can say for the last 2 employees I hired. Mom, this isn't... What if you live alone, what if? I interrupted him the same way I used to when he was 16 and working himself into a spiral. She's 55 years old and she folds a fitted sheet cleaner than anyone I've ever seen in my life. I think I'm okay. He didn't believe me, but he let it go. June was extraordinary in a way that was hard to explain to anyone who hadn't watched her work. She moved through the laundromat like she'd spent years studying efficiency. She reorganized the drop-off tracking system within the first week without being asked, creating a simple paper log that cut our lost order mistakes from 3 or 4 a month to 0. She fixed the drawer on the change machine that had been sticking for 2 years, using nothing but a flathead screwdriver and a patience I didn't know was possible. She learned the names of our regulars by the 2nd week. She remembered things, not just which customers liked their shirts on hangers versus folded, but the details they mentioned in passing. She'd asked Mrs. Petrakis how her hip surgery had gone. She'd tell Mr. Dorsey she'd set aside the sweater he'd left behind last Thursday. People started coming in specifically during her hours. But she never talked about herself. I'm a direct person. Frank always said I had the social subtlety of a blender. So I asked, over the course of those first few months, in the way you do, casually, sideways, not trying to pry, but not pretending not to be curious either. Where are you from originally? What kind of work did you do before this? Do you have family nearby? She answered every question with something technically true that told me absolutely nothing. I've moved around a lot. Different industries. My family is complicated. I let it go. I had my own complicated things to tend to. Then came year 2, and the numbers stopped working. Our biggest commercial client, a hotel chain that dropped off linens twice a week, switched to an in-house laundry system. That account had been 22% of our monthly revenue. The month after they left, I sat at Frank's old desk and did the math 6 different ways, hoping for a different answer. I didn't get one. I started making choices I'd been putting off. I stopped replacing light bulbs in the far corner of the shop. I let our cleaning service contract lapse and started mopping the floors myself after closing. I pushed the lease renewal conversation back by 2 months, hoping something would change. It didn't change. It got worse. The lease came due. The landlord, a man named Gene Kessler who wore orthopedic shoes and had the warmth of a parking meter, informed me that the new rate was 28% higher than what we'd been paying. I counter-offered. He said no. I said I needed time to think. He gave me 30 days. I was in the back office with the door pulled almost shut, going over the numbers for what felt like the 100th time when I heard June tap twice on the doorframe. "You all right?" she asked. "Fine," I said, "just tired." There was a pause. "You've said that a lot this week." I looked up. She was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching me with that steady gray gaze. "Lease trouble," I finally said. "The landlord wants more than I can afford. If I can't close the gap, I'm gonna have to let this place go." I heard myself say it and felt the bottom drop out somewhere under my ribs. 22 years. Frank's desk. The folding table we'd bought secondhand from a hotel that was shutting down. The particular smell of warm cotton and dryer sheets that meant I was home. June was quiet for a moment. "How much is the gap?" "It's not your problem." "How much?" "About $11,000 a month more than I'm bringing in," I said, "and that's before the equipment servicing I've been putting off." "Give me a few days," she said. I shook my head. "June, I appreciate it, I do, but you don't—" "Give me a few days," she said again. It wasn't bossy, it was just certain. She was gone the next morning when I opened up. No note. Her cot in the storage room was made with the precision of someone who'd been in the military or a hospital. Her canvas bag was gone. She came back on the third day, walked in at 9 o'clock like nothing had happened, set her bag down behind the counter, and handed me an envelope without a word. Inside was a cashier's check for $14,000, made out to Walsh Clean. I set the envelope down on the counter very carefully, the way you set something down when you're afraid of what happens if it tips over. "June," I said, "where did this come from?" "I had some money put aside." "You've been sleeping in my storage room. You've been taking $8 an hour." "I have some savings," she said simply, "from before." "This is nothing to me. Please, Bev. Use it to cover the lease gap and fix the machine. Get yourself some breathing room." I wanted to push back. I wanted to say no. But I looked at that check and I thought about Frank's desk and the folding table and the smell of warm cotton. And I said thank you, and I meant it more than I'd meant almost anything in years. That night, after June had gone to sleep in the back, I did something I'm still not entirely at peace with. I went through her bag. I told myself I just needed to understand. I needed to know who this woman was who'd handed me $14,000 like it was a bus token. I told myself I was being careful. But the truth is, I was scared, and when I'm scared, I need information. The bag had a change of clothes, a library book, a travel-sized bottle of ibuprofen, and at the bottom, tucked into a zippered interior pocket, a worn leather card holder. Inside was a driver's license, a photograph, and a business card. The license said June Adele Whitfield, age 57, address in Dallas, Texas. The photograph was of a younger June, maybe 15 years younger, standing at a podium in front of a large audience. She was wearing a dark blazer, and she was smiling the way people smile when they're good at something and they know it. In the background was a conference banner I could just barely read, National Healthcare Finance Summit, and the business card. June A. Whitfield, CFO, Meridian Health Systems. I had to sit down on the concrete floor. Meridian Health Systems. I knew that name. Everyone in Texas knew that name. It was one of the largest regional hospital networks in the country, headquartered right there in Dallas. 3 years before, they'd merged with a national group in a deal that had been all over the business news. The CFO who'd led the financial structuring of that merger had been written up in the Dallas Morning News. I hadn't paid much attention at the time because Frank was still alive and we had our own things to worry about. But the name had registered. June Whitfield. I put everything back exactly as I'd found it. I went home. I lay in bed looking at the ceiling and I thought about the woman folding flannel shirts in my storage room, and I did not sleep. The next morning, I told her what I'd found. I said it as soon as she came through the back door, before I could talk myself out of it. I know who you are. Meridian Health Systems. CFO. That merger. She went very still. She didn't deny it. She just put down her bag and sat down on the stool she kept behind the drop-off counter and looked at me for a long moment. Why? I asked. Why are you here? Why this? Why didn't you tell me? Because you didn't treat me like a CFO, she said quietly. You treated me like someone who needed a job and a place to sleep, and I couldn't remember the last time anyone had done that. That is not an explanation. No, you're right. She took a breath. You deserve the whole thing. Her name was June Whitfield. The merger deal had made her wealthy. She wouldn't say by how much exactly, but enough that she'd never need to work again. That part she said in the flat tone of someone describing a fact that brought them no pleasure. After the merger closed, she thought she'd feel accomplished. Instead, she felt nothing. And then the nothing got heavy. Her husband had left 4 years before that. Not dramatically, just quietly. The way a tide goes out, until one day she looked up and he was simply gone, and she found she didn't have enough energy to be as surprised as she thought she should be. They'd never had children. She'd always told herself they'd get around to it. After the merger, she had a large house in a good neighborhood in Dallas and a financial advisor who sent quarterly reports and absolutely nothing she was needed for. I just stopped, she said. I'd spent 30 years being needed, being essential, being the person in the room who knew where every dollar was and where it was going, and then, suddenly, I was just optional, and I didn't know what to do with that. She started driving. Not going anywhere in particular, just driving. She ended up in Denton. She'd seen a listing for a rental, thought she'd stop, look around, maybe stay a few weeks. But then she saw my card in the window and something made her stop. Something about the sign, she said. Walsh Clean. It sounded so simple, clean, like maybe you could just start over from the simple things. And then I asked her to stay, and she did. I asked the question that had been sitting in my chest all morning. Why didn't you just, with your money, why didn't you invest in something, start something new? Why fold other people's laundry for $8 an hour? She looked at her hands. Because I didn't want to be the CFO of anything, she said. I wanted to see if I could be useful as just a person. Without the title, without the net worth, without any of it. I wanted to know if there was something left when you took all that away. I thought about Frank, about how after he died, I'd gone to the laundromat every morning, not because I had to, not because it was making money, but because it was the only place I still knew who I was. I thought I understood her better than she expected me to. We sat there in the drop-off area for a while, the dryers tumbling behind us, and I asked her what she'd actually meant to do after this, whether she had a plan. She shook her head slowly. Not really. I haven't let myself plan very far ahead. It felt like a luxury I didn't deserve. What did you think you didn't deserve? Another pause. I wasn't there for the people who needed me. When my marriage was falling apart, I was working. When my sister got sick, I sent money instead of coming. When she stalked. There's a niece I barely met, my sister's daughter. She's 9 years old, and she sends me drawings in the mail because my sister taught her to, I think. Because my sister is more generous than I've ever been. And I don't know what to do with that. Her voice had gone very quiet. You could start, I said. That's all. You just start. She looked at me. You just call, I said. Or you get in the car. You don't have to have a whole plan. You just start. Something moved across her face that I can't quite describe. Like a wall coming down, very slowly, stone by stone. I don't know if I know how to do that, she said. Neither did I told her. After Frank died, I didn't know how to be a person in the world without him. But I came back here every morning, And one morning, it started to feel like mine again, not ours, but mine. And I thought, okay, this is enough to go on. She nodded, very slowly. That conversation changed everything. Over the next few months, June started contributing to Walsh Clean in a different way. She never told me what she invested or how she structured it. That was her world and she moved through it quietly. But suddenly, we could fix the commercial washer and replace 2 of the dryers that had been running hot, and hire a part-time weekend attendant, a college student named Petra, who was studying business and who June would spend her lunch breaks talking to about finance in that patient, precise way she had. I didn't ask the numbers. I just watched the shop start breathing again. June moved out of the storage room. She found a small rental about 6 blocks away, a 1-bedroom above a dry goods store, nothing fancy. But she kept coming to work every day. She kept folding laundry and remembering the regulars' names and asking Mrs. Petrakis about her hip. One evening in early spring, we were locking up together. June was wiping down the folding table and she stopped. "I called my sister," she said. I waited. She cried. June said, "We talked for 2 hours, and she wants me to come visit. Meet my niece properly, not just, actually be there." I kept wiping down the counter. "That's the right thing," I said. "I know," she said. "I'm scared of it." "Of course you are. Do it anyway." She went. She was gone for 8 days. When she came back, she showed me a drawing on her phone. A crayon portrait of 2 women, labeled in a child's handwriting, Aunt June and my niece. The woman in the drawing had a big smile and enormous hands. "She just grabbed my hand the whole time," June said, "like it was the most natural thing." Her voice was soft in a way I hadn't heard before. "Are you going to go back?" I asked. "Every month," she said. "And she's coming here in June." I told her we'd teach her how to fold a fitted sheet. I laughed. "That's actually a very good skill." "It is," June agreed, and she smiled, and it was different from the smiles before. Fuller, less careful. My son came to visit that fall. He'd been skeptical from the beginning. He was the one who'd called me reckless, who'd said I didn't know enough about this woman to trust her, who'd told me I was being naive. He arrived with his wife and my 2 grandkids on a Saturday morning and walked into the shop and saw June behind the counter talking to a retired teacher named Rosalind about which detergent was actually worth the money. Later, at dinner, he pulled me aside. "She's not what I expected," he said. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Something more." He made a vague gesture. "She's just so normal." "That's the whole point," I told him. "That was what she needed to be." He looked at me in that way of his, where he's trying to decide if his mother is wise or just lucky. I don't know which it is either, honestly. We are profitable now, not extravagantly. This is a laundromat in a mid-sized Texas city, not a tech company, but the machines are maintained, the lease is manageable. The weekend attendant Petra has turned out to be the most organized person I've encountered since June herself, and on Thursday mornings, we have a small free wash program for families in the apartment complex down the block, which June set up quietly and which has become, in a small way, the thing I'm most proud of. June is still here. She splits some of her time between Denton and visiting her sister's family in Albuquerque, and I can always tell when she's just come back, because she walks in slightly lighter, the way people do when they've been reminded that they belong somewhere. Last week she came in early before I'd unlocked. I saw her through the glass, standing there in her dark coat, waiting patiently the same way she had 3 years ago. But it was different. 3 years ago she was waiting because she had nowhere else to be. Now she was waiting because this was somewhere she chose. I opened the door. "Morning," I said. "Morning, Bev," she said, and walked in and started the first machines of the day. My son still calls every Sunday. He stopped asking me to move to Phoenix. Instead, he asks how the shop is going, how June is doing, whether Mrs. Petrakis's hip is holding up. He sent a card last Christmas addressed to Walsh Clean, not to me, to the shop itself. Inside, he wrote, "Glad you kept it." I am too, every single day. I'm 64 now. The folding table is the same one we bought secondhand 25 years ago. Frank's desk is still in the back office, and I still sit at it in the evenings when I'm doing the books. The machines are louder than they used to be, and the parking is still a problem, and on wet days, the front door sticks. But every morning I unlock it, and the dryers start turning, and the warm cotton smell fills the place up. And I think about the woman who showed up at my door in February with a canvas bag and nothing to lose, and I think about how I almost didn't ask her to stay. I almost just said good luck and let her walk back out into the cold. And I think about how the thing that saved me wasn't the check in the envelope or the repaired machines or the investor's numbers. It was just someone who needed to be needed, finding someone who needed to be found, and how sometimes that is more than enough, how sometimes that is everything. I think about that February morning more than I probably should. The way the cold came in under the door when I unlocked it. The way she was just standing there, waiting without any particular urgency, like she'd made peace with whatever answer I gave her. I almost just said good luck. I almost just let her walk back out into the gray. I didn't, and I've spent 3 years figuring out why, and I think the answer is simpler than I expected. I recognized something in her that I recognized in myself. Not the money, not the title, not anything I would have been able to name at the time. Just the particular stillness of a person who has been competent her whole life and suddenly doesn't know what to do with their hands. What June did for me, financially, practically mattered. I won't pretend it didn't. The check in the envelope, the repaired machines, the lease gap closed, those things were real and I needed them. But that's not actually what she gave me. What she gave me was proof that showing up, doing the work, being honest about what you can and can't carry, that those things still mean something. That integrity isn't a strategy you use when things are going well. It's the only thing that holds when everything else is going sideways. And June, what I think about with June is this. She had every resource a person could want. Money, experience, a mind that could restructure a hospital network's finances from the ground up. And none of it could give her what $8 an hour and a storage room cot could give her, which was a simple daily proof that she was still useful, that she still mattered to someone not because of what she'd built or what she was worth on paper, but because Mrs. Petrakis's hip was healing, and the drop-off orders weren't getting lost anymore, and there was hot coffee in the back when the morning shift started. That's the thing nobody tells you about intelligence and capability. They're only worth something when they're pointed at something real. June had spent 30 years being the smartest person in rooms full of smart people, and it hadn't been enough because she'd lost track of who she was doing it for. It took folding strangers' laundry in a town where no one knew her name for her to find that answer again. And the grit, hers and mine both, that's the part I'm most proud of. Not the dramatic kind, not the kind that makes a good speech, just the ordinary, unglamorous kind where you show up the next morning even when you don't know how the math is going to work out, where you keep the lights on one more month, where you make one more pot of coffee and unlock the door and let the day begin. Frank used to say that a business is just people choosing to come back, customers choosing to come back, employees choosing to come back, employees choosing to come back, you choosing to come back. He was right. That's all Walsh Clean ever was. And it turned out that was enough. Enough to give a grieving woman somewhere to land, enough to give me a reason to stay, enough to build something that my son now calls, with no irony at all, home. I'm 64 years old and I still mop my own floor some nights. I don't say that to sound noble. I say it because I want to remember what it felt like when I had no other choice, so that I never stop being grateful that I get to choose it now.